And welcome to the Jimmy Daytona Show. This fine morning, I have Elizabeth Grace Saunders, who's a noted time management expert and the author of 3 books, including Divine Time Management, 3 Secrets of Effective Time Management, and How to Invest Your Time Like Money. I am really looking forward to having her share her insights on time management, especially, during the holiday season and into the new year when people really start getting a grip on their lives and on their schedules and everything else. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for coming on the Jimmy Daytona Show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how did you get into time management as a career? How'd that all
For
happen?
sure. So it really came out of fixing my own problems. So I started my first business in 2005, where I did writing, editing, and photo styling for magazines, marketing companies, and marketing departments. And I really enjoyed what I did, but I had fallen into it. I didn't actually intend to be an entrepreneur. And so I went into it without a plan for my time. And what that meant was that I didn't really have boundaries around when I would be doing personal things. So I might do like personal errands or meet with friends during the day. But I also didn't have boundaries around when I would stop working. So I'd end up working late at night or on the weekends. And it got to the point where I'd kind of felt guilty if I wasn't working at any time of day or night, any day of the week. And after a few years of this, I was like, enough is enough. I don't care if I am successful. If I can never stop working without feeling guilty, I don't actually feel successful. And so I started on my own journey of getting more balanced with my time. And then my entrepreneur friends were like, Elizabeth, this is amazing. You should help other people. We're stressed out all the time. So they really came up with the idea. I was not intending to be a coach. And but I started in 2009 just doing time management coaching with small number of people, developing the niche. I was one of the first really in the world to really look at this particular niche of coaching. And then over the years, have had the privilege of now working with people all over the world. And this is the full-time thing I've done for many years.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience with it. If somebody is trying to get a grip on their time management, what are 3 things they can do to get started?
Well, I would say the very first thing I would recommend is figuring out what you actually want or what's actually important to you. So, in my first book, The 3 Secrets to Effective Time Investment, I talk about clarifying action-based priorities. And different people have different priorities, and that's okay. So, like some people, maybe it's working less, like it was for me. Other people, maybe it's they don't mind how much they're working, they just want to be more effective. So, number one, figure out what you actually want, what's actually important to you, so you have the end in mind. Number two, if you are not writing things down, you need to start doing that. So, some people come to me and they are not writing down their to-do list. They're hoping they remember tasks in their head, have a vague idea about projects, aren't planning them out. You really need to get everything written down into a trusted system. So, like David Allen talks about, mind like water. And then the third kind of general tip I would recommend is I highly encourage people to do daily and weekly planning. A lot of times people go into their days or their weeks without intention. And so you end up being very reactive instead of proactive. And so if you've really thought through what is it that I want to accomplish and get done, not just kind of what comes at me or what do I feel like doing in the moment, you're much more effective.
Well, thanks for that idea. I think there was a wise man named Habakkuk who said to write stuff on tablets.
Yeah,
I guess that brings
that
me
could
to
be possible.
yeah. There's a that brings me to the next point. How did you start incorporating your Christian faith
Mhm.
into your time management endeavors?
Absolutely. I'm happy to share. So, I am a Christian and I have been my whole life. So, I don't really remember a time when I didn't have consciousness of God. And I would say probably when I was 7 that I was really sure I was saved and had accepted Jesus and all of that. And so, I'm very blessed that that's just always been a part of my life. But I didn't necessarily have it at the forefront of my career to begin. Um, it wasn't that I was ashamed to be a Christian. And if I was talking to people one on one or faith came up, no problem at all talking about that. But kind of early in my career, I had had someone in my professional life, and she was actually a Christian herself, who basically quite discouraged talking about faith in a public way in regards to your work. I'm not sure exactly what was going on with her, but that was her perception. And so I just basically kept quiet about it. It wasn't on my website. It wasn't really something I brought forward, but I wasn't ashamed and I'm happy to talk to people individually. And so then what happened is about 6 to 7 years into being a time management coach. So I had started in 2009, so that would be about like 2015 or so. I was at a point where I was enjoying what I was doing. It was going well. I was very grateful, but there was something that just felt maybe a little empty about it. And so I was really seeking the Lord and asking him, like, is there something more for me, more I should be doing? Like, what's going on here? And I was very open. Like, I'm someone that really believes you need to be completely obedient to God. So I was even at the point where it's like, God, like, if you want me to do something entirely different, like not be a time management coach anymore, I'm open to that. Like, you show me your will. And what I felt like God spoke to me in that time was that I needed to be more honest and authentic about how everything really worked. And what I mean by that is, yes, I absolutely plan. I know my priorities. I write things down just like I recommend to other people. I'm a disciplined person. But ultimately, why and how everything works out is because of God. And so he told me that you just need to be more honest and forthright about that. And I didn't feel that he was telling me I needed to shut down my whole time management coaching business, but instead to have a Christian part of it. And so that led to me launching the Divine Time Management Group Coaching Program, which I was, yep, and to writing the book Divine Time Management. And so it's really a fun part of my life and career where now it's just up on my website. We don't continuously run the Divine Time Management Group. So, but it's always up. People are always aware. And I found that basically the opposite of what someone had told me early in my career was true. And instead of the fact people knowing I was a Christian turning them off or making them not want to work with me, there are many people who come to my website, read the information on divine time management, and say, that's exactly why I wanted to work with you because I'm a Christian or I'm a spiritual person. And having someone that I can work with that understands that sense of faith and God consciousness was really important to them. So it's been a wonderful thing. I really have not experienced bad things because I brought it forward. And in fact, I think it's just been a huge blessing to myself and my clients.
Yeah, you obeyed him, and it paid off
Yeah.
for me personally and professionally.
Hmm.
I know for me, I stumbled across you on a Harvard Business Review class on time management,
Hmm.
and then maybe about a year hence, I heard about your time management concept,
Hmm.
and I decided to like dig in a little bit deeper, just because I knowing me, sometimes I'm prone to either letting a day get away from me, or either forgetting to do something, or when I remember it, I don't have a chance to do it. And I alternate back and forth. So, and then sometimes, I get so busy that God takes a back seat and I know he shouldn't.
Right.
So I think that's why I started, reading your concepts a lot more closely. And for that, I'm beyond appreciative.
You're welcome. I'm glad you got benefit out of it.
Thank you. What have been some of your success stories with some of your clients? Where have they
Hmm.
been?
Hmm.
What magic did you work with them, and where are they at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been working with people, like I said, since 2009 for so over 13 years and worked with people on every continent except Antarctica. So no researchers have asked for my help, but other than that, people have asked for my help all over the world. And there are so many stories of people's lives being transformed, and I'll share a few, but I think one of the important things for people to keep in mind, regardless of, whether you work with me, which I'd be delighted to work with you, or if you're on this journey on your own, is this is really a lifestyle change. And so I think a lot of times where people can maybe make a maybe make a mistake isn't quite the right word, but have like a mental fallacy, is they look at time management almost as something to check off. Like, oh, I got good at time management, check. But that's not really what it's like. A better way to think about it is similar to being a healthy person. So it's not like you exercise for 3 months and then you've checked that off your list and you never have to exercise for the rest of your life. Like, it's like, no, throughout our entire life, if we want to be healthy, if we want all our body systems to work correctly and try not to get ill, we just have to have movement or physical activity as a lifestyle in our life. And so, in the same way, time management is really a lifestyle of choices around intentionality, around being organized, and around directing your time in your life towards what's most important, not just towards maybe what's easiest or what's coming at you at the moment. So I just share that because I'm happy to share these stories, but everyone should know it's not a static thing and it's not something you figure out in 3 months and then you never have to think about. So, in regards to my work, I work with individuals for at least 3 months. And the reason for that is I find change takes time. So, just going through the process of figuring out what works for you, working on establishing those habits, and also working on building resilience. So, when you get stressed out or overwhelmed or anything else happens, how to get back on track as quickly as possible. And so, in regards to that, in terms of some of my quote unquote success stories, we can call it, one of the stories I'll share is of someone that I worked with who is in a I'll call it a high management position. Just I always like to protect confidentiality of my clients, and so a high management position. And when she first came to me, what was really bothering her, she didn't mind working hard. She's a very smart, hard worker, but she really didn't like how she was ending up working almost every evening and sometimes also on the weekends. She's married, 2 young children, also wants to just be a healthy person, like have time to exercise and that sort of thing. And just the fact that she felt like she could never turn out for work was bothering her. It was making her feel burnt out and like she just wasn't really enjoying her job, even though she had a very good position. And so what we really worked on is she already was an organized person, so it wasn't that she wasn't writing things down or anything like that. But a lot of what we discovered was important to her were some more like macro level concepts. So one of the concepts was around since she was in a higher level of management and did have a number of people reporting to her, was just delegating a lot more. And so she worked a lot on thinking through, could other people attend these meetings? If another teammate is already attending the meeting, do I need to attend too, or would that be a redundant use of time for us? Um, are there just parts of meetings I could attend so I don't need to attend this whole 2-hour meeting? Maybe I just attend the first 10 or 15 minutes and give my thoughts and then I do something else. Also, just questioning whether meetings should be attended at all. And there were certain meetings that she really pushed back on whether her team needed to be involved because it wasn't really relevant to their group. So that was one way in which she really started parsing out more time. And if people are in the corporate world and they are in a higher level of management, that can be one of the biggest challenges, basically beating back meeting overwhelm and starting to create space to do work. So that was one part of it. The second part was really working on setting boundaries. So part of what was also becoming very stressful or kind of creating the situation she was in is she was working on an international team. And so it with her global role, there were people in Australia she was working with, as well as other parts of the world. And so if they wanted to have meetings at really weird times, or maybe they sent something over at a time that was logical for them, but wouldn't give her time to review it at a decent time in the United States. And there was just like a lot of this expecting her to be available at times that were convenient for Australia, which if you're living in the United States is like no time. Um, so, uh, so that was another thing where she needed to work on explaining if you if you need this reviewed, like this is when I need it by, so that I can do this during a time that's like a humane time to be awake in the United States. Or if this thing needs to get done, like this is how far in advance we need it so that we can go through it and make sure everything's good without me having to work over the weekend. And so there was a lot of like boundary setting around working norms and what worked or didn't work, as well as even who she would work with, because there are certain people that are just more difficult to work with. And she found just weren't the best fit for her and her team. And so that was like another key thing. And then the third thing is she really established and worked on figuring out what she wanted to be doing in the evenings instead of working. So she came up with a schedule around having time to exercise, having time with her kids, having time with her husband, having time for some of her own professional development on the evenings or some on the weekend. And what I'm very happy to report is at the end of us working together that she got to a point where she was very rarely working at night. So maybe once a week, but definitely not every week. Really able to take off time on the weekends and work hard, be focused, be very effective during her work hours, but then not feel like she was just constantly working all the time and it was stealing time away from her family or from her sleep or from exercise or those sorts of things. And so a lot of times what you'll find is that there's many different parts to getting to a successful outcome and that you have to address all the different things, whether it's how you're interacting with others, how you're letting people treat you, the decisions you're making, how you're organizing your time to then get to that better place with your time management.
Well, that's one of it sounds like she was like you like 5 years later. It's like you
Mhm,
had your process and you gave her your process
mhm.
and you both had really good outcomes.
Yep.
Um, yeah, tell me more about boundaries. It sounds like setting boundaries made you even more efficient, more effective. You're able to get just as much work done, if not more, without spending every waking hour at work,
Mhm,
and you make it a lot less frustrated.
mhm.
What was that process like, and like what boundaries are the most rewarding for you to set with others and with yourself?
Right, right. So I would say on my own journey, the most important boundaries were actually with myself. So I didn't have boundaries when I was working or not working, and that's what created a lot of the chaos in my own life before I got life more in order. And so I would say even if you're an entrepreneur or even if you work from home and you technically have a very flexible schedule, it's a very good idea to establish about when you're going to start work and end work. So for example, for me, I usually start around 8:45 or 9 in the morning, and then I usually wrap up around like 5:30 or 6. So those are just kind of my established norms. And what that means is that I really try to avoid uh, large amounts of like personal things during that time. Like occasionally it can't be avoided if there's a doctor's office and you just have to call them during those hours, and it is what it is. But trying not to do meetings or appointments that are for personal things during that time. Like for example, I have glasses that I need to pick up at the eyeglasses store, and I'm going to do that today, which is a Saturday, because their hours during the week are primarily during my working hours. And so just really not trying to do personal stuff during that time. But then conversely, if you're not doing personal things during your established work time, during your time outside of work, also trying not to do work. So for example, when I plan out my day or my week, I look ahead and I'm thinking, well, what are my deadlines? What needs to get done? How can I do this in such a way that when it comes Friday, that I can wrap up and I can just leave things to the following week before I'm going to touch them again. And so a lot of it is just establishing for yourself what's on and what's off, and then disciplining yourself to be really focused on work when it's work time, and so that you can really be off when it's not work time. In terms of boundaries with others, a lot of it depends on the situation that you're in, but I can give just a few examples. So one is like, for example, with my coaching, I do coaching during more normal quote unquote business hours. And I don't do coaching at 6 in the morning, or I don't do coaching at 8 o'clock at night. First of all, I wouldn't be a very good coach at those times. My brain is awake, but would not want to be talking to people like that at those times. But second of all, again, that's just establishing like this is what works for me, this is what works for my family, and I don't need to see clients at all times of the day or night, even though actually when I started in my coaching business, some people were saying, oh, well, it doesn't really work for people to meet during the day. So you have to meet with them at like 7 in the morning. And I just found that that's actually not true. Another thing in terms of boundaries, I would say is the methods of communication that you have with people that work for you. And so, for example, I try to communicate with my coaching clients primarily through email. If there's an emergency, someone might text me, which is fine, if something comes up that day or there's something particularly special to communicate. But one of the reasons why I prefer that I'm communicating with my clients via email is that it's all contained in that area. So I don't see their messages over the weekend. I don't see their messages in the evening. I just see them when I open up my business email on Monday through Friday in the morning, and I take care of it then. And so that can really help with the boundaries because if you're getting calls or texts or other sorts of messages from people related to work at all times of the day or night, it can just be harder to not reply or just harder for it not to be on your mind. And then in terms of other boundaries, again, it kind of depends on the situation, but one other common one that people might need to set with others is just expectations on when you need or want things. So let's say you're a manager and there's something that needs to get turned in to your boss and you have someone else working on it. If you need to review it prior to it getting turned over to your boss, you might set the boundary of telling the person you delegated it to that you need it done 2 business days in advance so you have time to then look at it and review it and make sure everything's okay before turning it in. And a lot of that is just helping people know what you need and making that very explicit because otherwise what can happen is that they're not even trying to be annoying or anything like that, but they might just turn it into you the day it's due and then it's a huge scramble or turn it in 6 p.m. the day before it's due and then you have to work late and you're upset or frustrated, and a lot of that can be avoided just by communicating very, very clearly in advance exactly what does or doesn't work for you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks for all your insights, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
How did you get linked up with Harvard Business Review, with Forbes, with
Mhm.
Fast Company, and with other
Yeah.
publications?
For sure. So with Harvard Business Review, that was actually through a connection I had of one of my friends who had written for Harvard Business Review. So he gave me an introduction, and so that's how that worked out. Unfortunately, if people are listening to this, I'm like, oh, Elizabeth, can you introduce me to other people? Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do that right now because my current editor I work with at Harvard Business Review only works with people that have published books with Harvard Business Review. So when I've asked her about that, she's like, well, there's a general portal where people can apply to be able to write. So that's the answer I have there. But that I did get connected through a friend who had written for them. Fast Company actually reached out to me. So I had been writing for a number of different publications, and Fast Company just came to my website and reached out and asked if I'd like to start writing for them. So that's how I made that connection. And then my connection with Forbes is through my involvement with a group called the Young Entrepreneurs Council that I've been on for quite a few years. And so I was able to connect with Forbes through that. So a lot of it has just been through connections, people knowing me, reaching out to me. And one thing I would say, if anyone listening is a business owner or would like to be one, just figure out what works for your business and be consistent. So I think one of the things that has really served my business well is that I'm conscious of where my audience is and how I can best provide value to them. And I really focus on that and I don't worry about doing everything all at once. So I've written for Harvard Business Review for almost 10 years. I have actually, I think more than 10 years. I've written for Fast Company for many, many years. I do that all consistently. But for example, I don't even have an Instagram account. I don't have a TikTok account. I'm not like chasing after every new social media thing, trying to uh, be popular there and have a million followers. I'm conscious and aware where I can add value, where my audience is, and I just continue to do that. And so I think that's another great time management strategy. Don't feel like just because something exists, you don't have to be a part of it. And it really, from not for everyone. For some people, those add great value, but for many, many people, there's not a huge uptick in value by being involved in all the latest fads. Just do what works.
Yeah, I mean, I like my social media, so I'm on all of them, and sometimes terms of the time management piece, 5 minutes can lead into a half hour, as is true with a lot of people. Now, given that you have pretty good boundaries at work and life, when you're off the clock, what do you like to do?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of things I like to do. So I did get married this year, so I'm very
Yes,
grateful for. God is faithful.
very cool.
God is also poetic. It took a few months before I was 40 to get married, but I did. So I love spending time with my husband, and we're expecting a little one, so preparing for a baby.
Oh,
Yes, God
congratulations,
is good.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so those are kind of the biggest things on my plate. But in addition to that, I love being active. So I'm a swimmer. I'm on a swim and triathlon team, though not competing with being pregnant. And I love worship, love being part of my church, and I've also gotten really involved in politics in the last few years in terms of just looking for the world to be a better place. And so I would say for anyone when you're trying to think about satisfying ways to use your time, definitely invest in your faith life. I'm a Christian, so that involves my church and God, but whatever that looks like for you, it's a huge part of having good mental health and just being a happy, healthy, joyful person. Invest in people that you love and care about, like my family and my friends are super important to me. And then invest in a way you can give back. So I chose to be involved in things that I felt would be creating a better, safer environment for both myself as well as for future generations, for our children and beyond. So for me, that avenue is through just being involved in causes I believe in my state, and supporting candidates that I felt would have like good Christian values that they'd be having in our culture. But for whoever you are, wherever you are, we need to give back and give back in the way that God's calling you to give back so that our lives are beyond ourselves and we can also be grateful for what we have. Because so often, if you just are focusing on your own needs, your own wants, it's it actually can make you miserable. So find a way to give back, be involved in your community, and try to really make this world a better place for yourself and future generations.
Wow, that's powerful, Elizabeth. How can people get a hold of you to work with you?
Yep. So my website is well simple, but pay attention to how I say it because it can be a little confusing to people. So it's reallifee.com. So you're going to have REALLIFE and then another E at the end.com. So you'll end up with two L's by each other and then two E's at the end. Um, but that's my website. You can find about my coaching, books, other resources. I've written hundreds, if not thousands, of articles that are posted up there. And I am happy to serve people anywhere in the world.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the Jimmy Daytona Show, Elizabeth. It's been great to hear your ideas. I'm so happy about your recent nuptials and your new child. Wishing you and your family all the best, and have an absolutely amazing Christmas and New Year's.
Thank you. I plan on it. Thanks for having me.
Beyond grateful.